We've arrived at tonight's keynote speech, presented by the one and only Tracey Holmes. My first memory of Tracey was in the late Harry M. Miller's office, round the table for a small media conference with Alan Jones, who I think was about to take up coaching Balmain for rugby league. And I didn't know anything about rugby league, and I got to see Tracey in action, and Alan Jones was very nervous. Since then, of course, Tracey has gone viral, and she's the reporter's reporter all over the world, breaking news on the big sports. And what else? And the other thing she does is she goes right behind the story, and she is respected internationally. She's a senior reporter presenter at ABC's NewsRadio, The Ticket. She focuses on sport and its wider implications. She was Australia's first female host of a national sports program, ABC Grandstand, after starting as a broadcast trainee in the late 80s. Her record is nothing short of extraordinary. She's anchored, reported and commentated from many of the world's biggest events, including 9 Olympic Games, the most recent being in London, where she anchored for Foxtel Australia. Not only that, Tracey is a PhD student researching the geopolitics of sport with the University of Technology, Sydney. And what she hasn't said is that she's been training journalists in Indonesia, the Pacific, and where else? India, South Asia, women journalists to become sports journalists. And the power of that cannot be underestimated. So please join me in welcoming Tracey Holmes, the great Tracey Holmes, to the stage.
Very little of that was true. Thank you, Philippa. Very little. Actually, I've been to 13 Olympic Games, and if we're allowed to travel to Tokyo, that will be my 14th. So they're racking up a little bit too quickly for my liking, so it might be a good idea if there is a pause on Tokyo. We'll just have to wait and see. I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, whose lands we gather upon this evening, and I give thanks to their hospitality. I also want to give thanks to Affinity and my cousin also, Ahmet, and his colleagues who have put on this wonderful evening of friendship and gratitude. When Ahmet asked if I would speak here this evening, I enthusiastically said yes, and then thought that all that was required is that I would turn up at the appointed time on the appointed day. I didn't realise Ahmed would send me 15 text messages a day, 25 emails, WhatsApp messages, and then he got several of his other cousins in the room tonight to ring me as well. Ahmed, I just want to let you know you are not alone. At the moment, I have 157,989 unread emails. Only 40 are yours. When I thought about what was in store this evening, I thought about this room, and I thought about all of you. I thought about all of your life journeys. I thought about your experiences and your thoughts. I thought about how remarkable it really is that by some twist of fate or divine intervention, or being attuned to the energy of the universe, or being swept up and corralled by others, that we've all ended up in this room at this moment together, despite all of our differences, whether they be differences in religion, differences in age, differences in politics, differences in outlook, differences in values, certainly differences in income, differences in education, and of course, differences in ethnicity. And what an evening it has been with all of us, with all of our differences in this room together. And that's what Affinity does. And I think all of you should give yourselves a round of applause for what has been managed this evening. And while we gather peacefully together, we also know that out there does not quite resemble what we're experiencing in here. Some of us have family or friends who are unable to return to this country despite being a citizen of it. Some of us have family or friends who are sick with coronavirus or one of the many other illnesses that inflict us at this time. Some of us have family or friends we may never see again. Indeed, some of us have had family or friends that have already departed. Because despite the fact that we are all here representing such diversity, the globe is such that borders are closed even to those who are closest to us. There are cricketers who have left and cannot return. There are mums and dads, brothers and sisters, aunties and uncles, all in the same boat. There are Olympians and Paralympians preparing to travel to Tokyo. There are businessmen and women, politicians, actors, and others who've sought special permission to be able to come and go in order to keep some parts of the global economy ticking over in uncertain times. Some of us will cheer that fact. Some others despise their special circumstances. In Australia, we don't have the same level of current challenges that others are facing in India or the USA or Japan, and yet many of us do fear that it could still happen here at some time in the future. As winter athletes from many of the world's nations prepare for their next Olympic Games in Beijing next February, there are others calling for them to boycott. Today, the deteriorating relationship between Australia and its major trading partner, China, sunk to yet another new low in a standoff where nobody actually wins. There is much to despair, and yet again, here we all are. Different, yet together, with differing worldviews, but able to share a meal in peace. I've had the great fortune to be able to live in a number of different cities and countries around the world, and with my children growing up in the homes of other people, people that don't look like us, they don't eat what we eat, they don't even speak the same language that we speak, yet our lives have overlapped, and each of us are the better for it. When we first moved to the Middle East, the call to prayer ringing out of every mosque, which seemed to be on every street corner before the sun rised, what would wake us suddenly, and in the very early days when we weren't expecting it, we would be shocked into being awakened by this call to prayer. And then, day by day, without us even realising it, it became part of our lives. And every time we heard that beautiful call to prayer throughout the day, we were reminded, and our children were reminded, to stop and pause for just a moment and think about others and think about ourselves and think about the ground that all of us stood on. Some years later, we moved back to Beijing, where we had lived previously. My sons would play soccer with the 3 German boys who lived next door. They didn't speak English. My sons certainly didn't speak German. But together, they found a way. A round ball and a whistle became the common language. At school, my youngest son's 3 best friends were a Jewish boy from Israel, a Muslim boy from Kazakhstan, and a Christian boy from Norway. And the 4 of them could not be separated. Every afternoon after school, every weekend, they'd be staying at one or the other's place. They got up to all sorts of strife, but they were together and they were the globe, and there were no problems between them. Some years later, we returned to Australia. Our middle son then became inseparable from his 2 best friends who shared their high school trials and tribulations together, a Chinese boy from Hong Kong and a refugee boy from Ghana. And now, today, in the street where we live, our neighbours on one side are Muslims from Lebanon, on the other, Buddhists from Vietnam, and across the road, a Muslim family has just moved in from Pakistan. We have shared meals, we've shared family celebrations, and Sunday afternoon conversations. We all think about things differently. We challenge each other by bringing different worldviews, and yet, there we all are, together in peace. My husband is an Indigenous man who's covered stories of people from all over the world. Together we talk about many things, we disagree on many things, we debate and challenge each other to try to think further, to be better, and to understand more about the world that we live in. His people are the only people who have been born of this place for thousands of generations. The rest of us have all come from somewhere else. And yet, the constitution of this country does not recognise that fact. But we did change one word of the national anthem, so at least now we are all one. I don't say any of these things with political overtone. I'm not talking about politics, I'm talking about people. I'm talking about you, and I'm talking about me. And I'm talking about the ground that we share together, despite all of our differences. We cannot let humanity become politicised. Many times during the 2 decades or so that I've spent together with my husband, I've heard people say to him, when discussing affairs that involve Indigenous people or Indigenous issues, "But you are different to the others." Actually, he's no different to the others. The only difference is that they have taken the time to talk to him, that they have taken the time to be interested in what he had to say, that they had taken the time to listen to a different perspective. They had taken the time to share common ground with him. And as we can see in this room tonight, all of us are different to each other, yet in many respects, we are all exactly the same. We want good lives for our children. We want security, we want health, we want jobs, we want a roof over our heads and food on our table that we can share with others. What you and I need, our highest priorities, are far more similar than those aspects that make us different to each other. Right now, those differences, those challenges, those bigger issues confronting our societies, our countries, and our planet are out there, not in here. Here is what I'd like all of us to think about tonight. When we each leave this evening, what can we take from in here to spread out there? To make the outside world resemble a little more closely the inside world that we share with each other this evening. We will never ever all be the same, and isn't that a wonderful thing? We will never ever all think the same way. We do not even experience this world in the same way. We've not even experienced tonight in the same way. We will all take a little something that is different when we leave the room tonight. And yet once again, here we are. I give thanks for this evening together. I give thanks for the meal that we shared. I give thanks for the conversations and the time we've spent getting to know each other a little bit more. I give thanks that each of us this evening will take what we have shared together and share it with others from in here to out there. I give thanks. Ramadan Mubarak.